Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the DFS show for Wednesday, January 20th. I hope you guys all had a lot of success last night. I think we did a pretty good job. A lot of our top plays hit. Florida won, had a terrific night, and Ottawa won, had a terrific night for their prices, and then everybody else seemed to go off as well. I knew by saying that I never played Tom Wilson that inevitably he would have a big night, which he did. So, missed on Tom Wilson, obviously, but the rest of it, I think we did a really nice job last night. Looking for more success again tonight, but hopefully you guys found the right combinations of players last night and really hit it big. Again, I'm going to be breaking down today's 5-game slate. Pretty nice slate again. We've got a mixture of some what look like high-scoring games and some lower-scoring games. So obviously we're going to want to target those high-scoring games, and we'll get right into that. Got a couple of comments early, which is great. The first one comes from Tanner. He says, I'm a premium member and I'm using your optimizer. What does CV mean? Okay, so CV is a little confusing just because, it is, I'll bring up the optimizer here for a minute for you guys. So CV actually stands for cafe value. And what cafe means is this optimizer is actually brought to you by our friends at Daily Fantasy Cafe. So CV is kind of just like their own thing. It doesn't really mean anything to DFO users, but it's a pretty cool feature actually. So it's basically points per $1,000, but it's weighted against the rest of the players at that position for any given night. So if you've got like John Tavares, who's projected pretty high tonight, his points per $1,000 weighted against the other centers on the slate. Same can be said for the other for the winger. So it's weighted over the evening. So each slate is different. It's the points per 1,000 weighted against the entire slate. So obviously the higher the number, the better. Nick says, love the show. Thank you very much, Nick. Thanks for tuning in. But all right, let's get into tonight's 5-game slate. So it opens at 7 o'clock with the Maple Leafs hosting the Oilers. Frederik Andersen back in net for Toronto. Mikko Koskinen, pretty much the only goalie left in Edmonton, so he'll go for the Oilers. Then we got the Blues and the Sharks at 9 o'clock, rematch of the other night, which was a really high-scoring affair. Hopefully, similar results tonight. Binnington goes for the Blues, and Martin Jones back in net after Devin Dubnyk started the other night. Dubnyk actually looked pretty good. I was surprised they didn't come back to him. I mean, he did get shelled for 5, but all in all, he made some really big saves. He really kept them in it. We expect John Gibson to be back in net, although unconfirmed. He did have a shutout against Minnesota, though, so there's really no reason for him not to start tonight. And Kaapo Kähkönen makes his season debut for the Wild. Kähkönen, if you aren't familiar, pretty good numbers at lower levels, pretty impressive goaltending prospect, so shouldn't be too big of a drop-off from Talbot. I really like Talbot tonight. I was a little bit disappointed, but I think Kähkönen actually provides us with about $300 worth of savings, so I'll definitely be on Kähkönen, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. Then 2 late games. We've got Vegas hosting Arizona again. Robin Lehner. I would keep an eye on this one. So they're not announcing their goalie this year, and but Lehner was the first goalie off the ice, but it was the first morning skate they've done all year. So the Vegas beats weren't 100% that it's going to be Lehner tonight, but it's all signs are pointing towards that. But either way, him or Fleury, pretty good spot against Arizona, especially with Barrett Hayton out, should limit a little bit of Arizona's offense. And then Darcy Kemper. He's only 7,000 tonight. He's really interesting because really Darcy Kemper is one of the best goalies in the league. But Vegas is an absolute unit right now, specifically that top line, that top 6 really altogether. And then Braden Holtby expected to go for Vancouver. Carey Price confirmed for Montreal. Surprisingly enough, both of these goalies have terrific numbers against like the opposing team throughout their careers. So something's going to have to give tonight, or it's going to be really low scoring. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. That looks like one of the higher scoring games on tonight's slate. So let's break these games down. Jake the Snake says, hey man, how's it going, Jake? Thanks for tuning in. And Tanner, thank you so much for answering. That helps a lot. Yeah. The CV is interesting. Like it's obviously weird when because you don't really see Daily Fantasy Cafe anywhere on that optimizer, so you'd have no idea what that means. Is there a site you prefer to find advanced stats? Yes. All the stuff that I have comes from Natural Stat Trick. It can be tricky to use at first, but once you get used to it, it's just an absolutely incredible resource. Especially because you can filter by different stats and stuff. It makes it a lot easier. You can kind of get rid of all the unimportant stats and really find what you're looking for. Hockey Reference is really good too. Hockey Reference gives you a really nice, quick snapshot of the players' underlying numbers. Like specifically, if you're looking for like like shot shooting percentage or on ice shooting percentage, that's the best place to go for me. Because finding an individual player on natural stature can be a little bit difficult. But all right, let's get into tonight's slate. At the very top, I've got Toronto 1. Their underlying numbers are absolutely outstanding. They're going to be towards the top every single night Toronto's playing, which I'm sure you've kind of noticed over recent weeks or recent games, I should say. Vegas 1, right behind them, is the second best line to stack tonight. They're an absolute horse. That line is outstanding. And right now they have the highest goals for or expected goals for percentage in the league, which I think they had last year over the whole course of the year. So it's nothing different. Chandler Stevenson on that line really doesn't slow them down at all. He's getting up there in price. So, if you're going to play Vegas 1, you can potentially leave Chandler Stevenson off, but he also is still cheap enough where it allows you to play Vegas 1 full stack with other pretty expensive lines. So Montreal 1, again, if this is your first time listening to the show, Montreal 1's always going to kind of pop off because their underlying numbers are just so outstanding, but they don't have like that premier goal scorer. So they're not always like, they generate chances and control the puck possession, unlike any other line in the NHL, but they just don't really have like a true finisher. So like they're always going to pop, but doesn't always mean they're the best play. I always like to have a little bit of Montreal 1 because at any given night they could go off just because they have the puck that much and generate that many scoring chances. Some nights they do go off. We've already seen it this year. So sprinkling in a little bit of Montreal 1 is never a bad idea in a good matchup. Tanner says, is it smart to play showdowns or should I just stick with the main slate? NHL showdowns are a nightmare. I've had a little bit of success with them. I don't do them a lot. I would probably, I would stick with the main slates, or go with the smaller slates if you want to play more. Play the early slate or play the late slates. Do something like that. Showdowns in the NHL can be a nightmare. They're tough. But I mean, if you've got the bankroll and you want to throw a couple bucks down on a showdown, they're always fun. Especially if yesterday there was like an island game, right? You've got all the games early, and then I think it was LA, Colorado late. And if you're still up watching that game, I mean, you might as well throw a couple bucks for a little showdown. Why not? Toronto 2 grades out really well. It's been really difficult this year to pick between Toronto 1 or Toronto 2. Most nights they both go off. Toronto 2, John Tavares looks outstanding this year. William Nylander looks, really good again. But Tavares looks like he's brought his game to another level. So if you don't want to pay up for Toronto 1, Toronto 2, equally as good of a spot tonight and just so much cheaper. John Tavares at 6,600 is an absolute steal. You're definitely going to want to get some John Tavares in your lineups at 6,600. Even if he's kind of like you're stacking other spots and you want a one-off, 6,600 John Tavares is a great spot. Obviously, Edmonton 1 looking pretty good. Connor McDavid's outstanding. The one thing you will notice is Edmonton 2 way down here. We're finally able to start incorporating some of their numbers from this season with Dominic Cahoon playing on the line, and they just have not been very good. We'll get to that a little bit later. I'll show you the whole outlook on Edmonton 2. Their numbers just have not been very good right now. So if you're going to go Edmonton, definitely look at Edmonton 1 tonight. But so speaking of Edmonton 1 and Toronto, let's go back to the top here. Anderson and Koskinen. So what's going to happen tonight? It looks like Toronto 1 is going to see kind of a mixture, but mostly the Draisaitl line. And it's going to be up to the Tavares line and the Kerfoot line to slow down Connor McDavid. So if we look at where those lines rank, so obviously Toronto 1, Toronto 2, even Toronto 3, not bad, but I'm just not going to pay down for them when you've got just the elite talent level of Toronto 1 and 2. Both generating, 36 scoring chances, 4 per 60, outstanding. 14 high danger chances, 4 per 60, outstanding. And then you look across over at Edmonton. I mean, not a lot of defense being played over here. So Toronto, obviously, in just an outstanding spot. Mikko Koskinen is playing a lot. The only concern I do have about Toronto, and I don't want to butcher this number, but I think this is their 4th game in 6 nights. So fatigue could play a factor, but it's still early in the season where I'm not too worried about that yet. So Toronto obviously played both those top 2 lines outstanding. But like, as you can see here, like this is the Draisaitl line. Only 24 scoring chances, 4 per 60 right now, only 7 high danger chances. They just do not look very good. Even though they came out, looking amazing in game 1, since then it just hasn't really worked out. So Toronto firmly in play, especially the top line, because they're going to see less of the McDavid line, which is the best defensive line so far this year for Edmonton. So Toronto 1 is my favorite, but I wouldn't fault you for paying down for Toronto 2 just to get that $3,000 in savings. From the Edmonton perspective, they are expected to see mostly Toronto 2 and Toronto 3. As I said, Toronto 3 is definitely gettable. That Kerfoot line is exploitable for Connor McDavid, especially. So McDavid firmly in play, and that's probably as much as I would go into that game. I wouldn't go any deeper on Edmonton. You can save some salary by playing Zach Cassian. He's kind of like your Tom Wilson from yesterday. I don't normally play him, but if you want to stack him with other top lines, playing Zach Cassian at 2,900 is not the worst idea. So, yeah, like Toronto 2 is interesting too. Like you got Jimmy Vesey. I think he's averaging like 2.5 shots per game. So the shot volume is okay. And who knows? Maybe he can have that Zach Hyman game from the other night. I think Hyman had like 11 shots. It was ridiculous. I don't know how he got 11 shots. Like I looked and all of a sudden he had 7 shots like 8 minutes into the game. I don't even know how it happened, but he had 11 shots. And Jimmy Vesey probably not going to do that, but at 3,300 allows you to stack that line for a really, really reasonable price. And goaltending wise, I think. Yeah, Anderson's 8,100. Mikko Koskinen 7,500. I don't really have a lot of interest in either of them. If I was going to play one, it would be Anderson. But I don't like Anderson. He looked great against Winnipeg, but Winnipeg, they struggled for 2 periods last night against Ottawa too. Their offense just isn't quite going. Line wasn't there, so I don't really trust that one game from Anderson. And as much as Edmonton's struggling, I think they're 0 for 10 in the power play their last 2 games. They've only scored 2 goals. But Montreal looks really good. So I still think that Connor McDavid coming back to Toronto, Leon Draisaitl is going to get hot eventually. We saw Malcolm get hot yesterday finally. So I don't trust Anderson that much. I think this could be a really high scoring game. As I mentioned yesterday, I started adding pace in a little bit. It seemed to work pretty well. I mean, we had Buffalo and Philadelphia way down there in pace yesterday. It was low scoring as can be. Detroit, Columbus was way down there in pace yesterday. It was only 2-2 going in overtime. So, and then some of the other games, they really popped off. Florida, Chicago was up there. It was like 5-4, I believe. So this pace seems to, after one day of trying it out, it looked like it's pretty successful. So as you can see here, Toronto at the very top of the list. So I would expect that to be a pretty high scoring game. Jonathan says, love tuning in the show whenever I can. Great content, man. Thank you very much. Is this Google Doc on premium? So right now, this Google Doc is not on premium. The only thing that is the 5v5 scores, which is this. This is on there. Eventually, everything will be on premium, though. Every single thing that you see in this document will be available on premium. It's just not all on there yet. We are working to move everything over, but I would say probably by week's end, all of these documents should be on there. I don't trust Anderson. Such a big risk whenever he's out there, I think. Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially when there are better goaltending options. If Anderson was 7,600, then fine. But 8,100 Anderson, no thank you. I'd rather play Lehner at 8,500. We going to make bank tonight, Jake the Snake? Yeah, man, we're making bank every night. At least that's the plan. We're trying our best here. And, it's been a pretty successful start to the season, I think. So hopefully we can keep rolling. But let's move on to the second game of the slate, St. Louis and San Jose. It's going to be fun to game stack Edmonton, Toronto, and you're going to be out and making so much money at the start of the night, and then all the late games will start. This will be exciting for the first couple hours. All right, St. Louis and San Jose. So the Ryan O'Reilly line is expected to see a ton of San Jose's top lines. If you didn't know, or if you haven't been around today to see it, San Jose changed up their lines completely. Bob Bugner said he wants to get more out of his bottom 6. I don't know how that's going to happen with the players he's got in his bottom 6, but the top 6 looks pretty good. But with Ryan O'Reilly expected to see 65%, I think it was 72% actually. Yeah, 72% of the Logan Couture lines are expected to come against Ryan O'Reilly. No, thank you. I think that they'll see quite, a decent bit of ownership from, at least on the San Jose side tonight, because Ryan Donato's up there. As soon as I posted the lines on Twitter, a lot of people were really freaking out about how Ryan Donato was up there. Doesn't do much for me. There's other good value options on the slate. Ryan Donato 3,100, he's fine. LeBanc, it's a pretty good price for Logan Couture line, but I'm just not going to go there. I like San Jose 2 a lot better. They grade out a lot better. Obviously, they're a little bit more expensive, but Meyer, Hurdle, Kane, that looks like that looks like money in the bank right there. Hurdle has been outstanding to start the year. Getting the guy with Meyer's shot volume on that line should only help. So I really like San Jose 2 tonight. The nice thing, still Hurdle and Kane together on the top power play unit. You can play them with Burns if you can fit that. It gets really pricey at that point. But I wouldn't fault you if you're looking for a deep hunt playing Mario Ferraro. The Sharks rave about this kid. He is on the second power play unit. Does play with Burns at even strength. So Ferraro looks like a pretty good D option if you're going to play San Jose and don't want to pay up for Brent Burns. So if you're going to play that side of the puck, I really like San Jose 2 tonight. On the other side, I absolutely love St. Louis 2. I mean, when you can get Braden Shen at 4,100, Jaden Schwartz at 4,700, I play them all day. They're kind of always been a DFS favorite of mine because their price is never really that high, and they always look really good. I played them the other night. Schenn scored a goal. It was kind of unfortunate. It was originally credited to Schwartz from Schenn, and they took it away from him and only gave it to Schenn, so then Schwartz lost his points. But both of those guys like to shoot the puck a decent amount, so I have a ton of interest in them tonight. St. Louis, too, looks great. They're expected to see a lot of the hurdle line, where if we look here, the hurdle line giving up 28 scoring chances against per 60, which is the most on the San Jose Sharks, and it's quite a bit. So St. Louis, too, looks like the best play on the St. Louis side of the puck. Sorry, it's a lot of talking. Get parched here. When picking goalies, should we target a high total for saves or low total for shutout? It's kind of a mix, right? Like you're trying to find the best combination of the two. There's certain spots like Darcy Kemper tonight at 7,000. You can definitely play him because he's so cheap. He's one of the best goalies in the league, and Vegas shoots the puck a ton. So in a spot like that, same goes for. Let's go to goalies here for a second. Same goes for John 300. Had a 30 plus save shutout the other night. Minnesota, for like the lack of depth at center that they have been generating quite a bit of offense this year, but they just don't really have that many like great goal scorers. Like Kaprizov looks good. Fiala's obviously outstanding. Parise good. But they don't have like a lot of game breakers. So John Gibson's another guy where you could see a lot of shot volume. Him and Kemper both might lose tonight, but they could both hit the 35 save bonus, and they would hit value at that point. Those are probably my two favorite low price guys. The middle gets kind of ugly if we're talking about playing John Gibson in a low scoring game. I definitely love Kakkonen tonight. I think he's one of probably my favorite goalie play just because of the price. But if you need to save the 300, I don't think there's much difference going between Kakkonen or John Gibson. I think it's going to be a pretty low-scoring game, just like it was the other night, and it just depends which side of the puck you're on. Obviously, you're stacking Minnesota, you got Kaprizov or whatever, you're not going to want to play John Gibson. Kyrou, Sean says, Kyrou, would you stack all of St. Louis Stewart, Schwartz, and Schenn? So it all depends, right? Like, if you are playing them with Toronto 1 and you need the salary savings, Kyrou definitely. If you're playing them with another cheaper line, I would probably leave Kyrou off and spend money on better defensemen. But it just all depends. Like if you want a full stack, Kyrou's definitely in play at 2,900. Definitely strong way to fill out that full stack. You can play them with Marner and Matthews, and then still have enough money left over to one off a really good player. So Kyrou's definitely a good option to round out that full stack. Let's go to the third game of the night. We just kind of talked about it. I don't have a ton of interest on either side of this game. I do like Minnesota 1 a little bit. I think Kaprizov is still underpriced at 5,400. He looks absolutely outstanding. So I definitely have a little bit of interest. I just don't. You can't full stack them because like they start Victor Rask there and then he's off the line like halfway through the game and they mix and match all the time. So I have no problem playing Parise, Kaprizov, and then I think it's Spurgeon on that top unit. Still, they changed things up a little bit last game. Let me just double check here. Jared Spurgeon. I don't mind that stack. Parise, Kaprizov, Spurgeon. It's super cheap. It's a little bit similar to last night's Ottawa stack. I think it's a pretty decent spot just because I think that Kaprizov kid's unbelievable. There's really no line matching going on whatsoever in that Anaheim, Minnesota game. So you don't really have to look into the matchups too much. But Anaheim's so far this year and parts of last year giving up a ton of scoring chances against. So Minnesota's side of the puck looks a lot better. Obviously, Minnesota's a really good defensive team, so I have no interest whatsoever on the Anaheim side of the puck. So Minnesota 1, Kaprizov, Parise, and Spurgeon is probably as deep as I would go into this game. No further. No questions? Okay. Moving on. We've got Vegas and Arizona. So Arizona looked really good for a little bit, about half the game the other night, really limiting Vegas. And then all of a sudden, the juggernaut that is the Vegas Golden Knights kind of just took over the game. Their top line, again, grades out as one of my best on the slate tonight, but I also have a lot of interest in Vegas too. We saw Riley Smith score 2 goals with an empty netter the other night. I think that Vegas 2 is a really good play. You're going to want to get some exposure to them tonight, like Vegas as a whole, that is. And Vegas 2 is a really cheap way of doing that. The one thing I hate about Vegas is just the way it's similar to like Toronto, right? Like it'd be so fun to play Marner, Matthews, and Tavares together. Like I did it a ton last year because they were all in the same power play unit. Now that they're broken up, it's kind of hard. You can still do it because they're awesome and they score tons of goals. But the same can be said for Vegas. I mean, you've got Stone and Pacioretty on the top unit, which is great. Then you got Marceau Smith on the second unit. That's fine. But Carlson on the top, it's just so fragmented, right? So obviously you're going to want to play, Theodore if you're playing Vegas 2 and Pietrangelo if you're playing Vegas 1. And then if you can't afford either one of those defensemen, Zach Whitecloud's looked really strong early on. I think he's only like 2,700. One of my favorite deep punt plays of the night. So if you're going on either side, Whitecloud plays a lot with those top two lines. So Whitecloud's a pretty good punt option. And if you can fit the defenseman, just make sure you're playing the right ones. Pietrangelo with Vegas 1, Theodore with Vegas 2. Fiala shoots a ton, so he may be worth shoving in despite being on Minnesota 2. Yeah, 100%. If you want to play Minnesota, if you do play that top line, the Kaprizov, Spurgeon, Parise stack, definitely throwing in Fiala is not a bad idea. He shoots a ton, and we have seen them go. I'm going to pull it up here. We have seen them go to 3 of them, I think, a couple times, just in mid games throughout this season. So let's see if I'm right or if I'm just making that up. Yeah, they've only played a minute together, so I made it up a little bit, but they did not give up a single shot again, so that's good. But yeah, on the power play, it's not a bad idea throwing him in there because his shot volume is outstanding, and Fiala can put up 8 shots on any given night. So if you do want to play Minnesota, it'll definitely be contrarian tonight, and like a full Minnesota 1 power play stack is definitely not going to be very high owned, and I like it, to be honest with you. Who would I pair with Toronto 1? So I think my favorite pair with them is St. Louis 2 tonight, just because of the price. It allows you to still play some pretty good defensemen. You don't have to get too punty with it, and if you do want to get punty with it, like you can play Matthews, Marner, St. Louis 2 full stack, punt your D-man, and probably still fit McDavid in there somewhere or something like that. So St. Louis 2 with Toronto 1 is probably like the best setup in terms of price. But obviously, like any of these top lines compare well with them. I would put I built a couple lines before I came on with Toronto 1 and Vegas 1 together. It gets tight. You got to get punty with it, but it's definitely doable. So like any of these top lines are, anybody that I want to play with my top stack of the night. But in terms of like actual price, St. Louis 2 best value on the slate, and playing them with Toronto 1 really opens up a lot of options. What's the maximum number of guys who will play from a single team? Right now I have 4 Vegas guys, and I'm worried I'm too invested in the game. No, not at all. So it all depends, right? Like if you're playing a bunch of lineups, you can do whatever you want. If you've listened to the show before, I've talked about a Josh stack. That's like, you can do 6 or 7 guys from a single team. Josh used to stack like 6 guys on a team, and if they go off, then it's, a lot of times you do see lineups like that at the top, especially if it's a relatively low scoring night and one team goes off. So if you're building multiple lineups, playing a bunch of guys from one team is not a horrible idea at all. If you're only playing one lineup, 4 is not too many, especially if it's Vegas. If you had 4 Anaheim guys or 4 Minnesota guys and you're only building one lineup, I'd be a little bit worried. But 4 Vegas guys, is fine, especially if they're good. If you've got a full line stack and a defenseman in there, that's totally fine. All right, let's go to this is the last game of the night already. All right, Vancouver, Montreal. Let's do it. So again, Montreal 1 always pops. That's fine. This looks like a pretty high scoring game. Again, if we go back to the matchups, we've got Vancouver 1 expected to see a lot of the Danault line. So that really hurts Horvat's overall output tonight versus the actually, do I have Pettersson's line ranked as number 1? Probably. So that hurts the Pettersson's line's output tonight. Vancouver 2 looks like the better play. Yeah, sorry. So the Horvat line looks a little bit better just because you don't really like stacking against Philip Danault. Again, if we've looked at it before, only 23 scoring chances against for 60 for Philip Danault, and that Montreal top line, they're just really, really good. Stacking against Montreal is not easy, and Vancouver hasn't really looked right tonight, so I don't have a ton of interest in Vancouver. But Montreal looks fine. I don't like, again, I would sprinkle in a little bit of Montreal 1 if you're building a lot of lineups, but they always look good and they don't do anything really. And it's not like they're cheap. Like if they were cheap, be fine. I do have interest in Montreal 2 tonight. I absolutely love Nick Suzuki. Josh Anderson's looked really good there lately. You can throw Jonathan Drouin in the mix as well. But if you want to leave Drouin off, that's fine. He just doesn't shoot very much. But the full stack only 15,300, so you can fit tons in with them. Obviously, Jeff Petrie is just scorching hot right now. Shea Weber also a strong play. Alexander Romanov looks outstanding right now. So that's the one thing I would look at is if you want to play a little bit of Montreal 1. I don't hate Gallagher, Tatar, Romanov. Romanov looks really good. And if you play Gallagher, Tatar, and Romanov, there's some pretty high shot volume upside there, and they're not that expensive. So you know you're going to get a lot of puck possession, a lot of chances for Montreal 1, and like I said, some nights they can just go off. And if tonight's the night, you'll have Gallagher and Tatar and Romanov all in there, and that's pretty good. And if you want to go with Montreal 2, which is my preferred option, Suzuki, Drouin, Anderson. Unfortunately, not all in the same unit, but that's fine. Pairing them with Weber or Petrie is a good idea. But it's really hard. There's a lot of expense. Like, it's hard. All the good options are expensive tonight. So, like, when I found myself when I was building lineups earlier, I was having a really hard time getting any expensive defensemen in. Like, some mid-price guys, like I was able to fit Torrey Krug in my St. Louis lineups and stuff like that. But, like, that was as high as I could go, really. Are there any rookies that are still way underpriced? And then the other guy asked, would I play Carey Price? So rookies that are underpriced. There are some, like, I still think Romanov is pretty cheap, for what he brings to the table. But not really. Like Hoglander 3,900 looks still pretty good. If you're going to play Vancouver 2 tonight, like I said, Vancouver 2 is probably the best Vancouver play tonight. So Hoglander at 3,900, he's still super talented. And like what he's going to end up doing this year is probably doesn't match this 3,900 price tag. I did mention Kaprizov, but he's still just he's up there already. But I still think that's too cheap for what his overall output is. What about Toffoli? Is he worth a one-off? Yeah. He can be. I like Toffoli quite a bit as a player. His shot volume is usually pretty good. The one thing that's interesting, it all depends. Like that Cockney-Emmy line, their usage seems to fluctuate a ton. But when you've got Tyler Toffoli, I mean, 3 shots, 2 shots, 2 shots in his first 3 games in Montreal at 3,900, I think that's a really good price for a one-off play of Tyler Toffoli. And like I said, like that Cockney-Emmy line, like a couple games ago, they played more minutes than any other line in that team. And if that's the case, then that's great news for Toffoli. But like last game, I think they played only like third line minutes, like 11 minutes or whatever, and like at even strength that is, and then it's not that not really worth it to play a third line player. Would I play Price? A buddy of mine texted me that before the show, and yeah, I would. I wouldn't like be over the moon about playing him a bunch, but like a little bit of Price is fine. If we look at the goalies here, he's right in the middle, 8,000. Again, Dom Lucian provides these probabilities, and he likes them to beat Vancouver tonight, and I tend to agree. Vancouver, like I said, hasn't really looked great to start the season. Pedersen's been getting a lot of slack on Twitter, so I would definitely play Price. Like, I do like Kakinen a lot, but I think Price's win probability is a little bit higher, although I'm clearly disagreeing with Dom. That, but Price is fine at 8,000. I like him more than Anderson, and I like him probably a little bit more than Binnington as well. I think that St. Louis game can get a little bit high scoring. That would be troublesome for Binnington. But again, I really like Robin Lehner. Price is fine at 8,000. Kaprizov is still really low on FanDuel. Yeah, I wish I played FanDuel. I would know. But that's great to know. If you guys play FanDuel, Kaprizov's still super cheap. Definitely play him. The kid is an absolute stud. I do think I skipped somebody's question. I have Toronto 1 stack with Pacioretty and Stevenson and 2D from Vegas. Yeah, that's fine. Stone, like I like playing Mark Stone because when that line goes off, he normally picks up a couple assists. But like Stone's price is always hard to fit in because like when he goes off, he goes off. But a lot of times he has 1 shot and like an assist, and he ends up with like 6 points. So or 6.5 points or whatever it is. So if you're going to leave somebody off, I don't mind leaving Stone off. Obviously, you lose a little bit of that PP correlation without Stevenson on that power play unit, but that's fine. If you're playing with Toronto 1, that's completely reasonable. But yeah, let's again talk about some of these cheap defensemen. Again, if you guys have any more questions, I'll be here for about 5 more minutes. We'll get to all your questions here. If there's something I didn't talk about, I apologize, and I will answer your questions. So like I said before, we've got Justin Hall, I think is 2,700. I'm just trying to find him here. Where are you, Justin? Yeah, Justin Hall, 2,700. He's going to play a lot of the minutes against McDavid tonight. He's going to play a ton. He's been over 20 minutes every single game this year. He sees a lot of 5v5 ice time with the Matthews line, with the Tavares line. So definitely opportunities for him to pick up points playing with those guys. Blocks a decent amount of shots. Can easily hit the 3 block shot bonus on DraftKings. So I really like Justin Hall at 2,700 tonight. White Cloud, same thing goes for him. Almost the exact same type of player. He's been shooting quite a bit this year. His ice time has been increasing recently. Saw just 17 minutes last game, but still decent amount, over 20 his first 2 games. And been shooting quite a bit. Picked up an assist last game. Will block a shot here and there. So, excuse me, I really like White Cloud. Parayko is a one-off. Parayko is one of my favorite defensemen in the entire NHL. I just never seem to play him very much in DraftKings because his price is always like a little too high for me because he's never on PP1, but he shoots a ton and he can block 3 shots anytime. So yeah, if you have 4,700 to spend on a one-off defenseman, Parayko is definitely in play. I would prefer playing Krug, but he's a little bit more expensive. So if you have, again, 4,700 to play a one-off defenseman, Parayko is definitely a good defense play. He was kind of like last night's Subban. Like I wasn't, in love with Subban, but I played him a little bit when I had that money left over. If you're in that price range, I would definitely look at Alec Martinez as well, unless you're already stacking a bunch of Vegas guys. Martinez, he had 7 blocks the other night. The guy's an absolute machine in terms of blocking shots and sees a ton of ice time with Shea Theodore, so always opportunity to put up points there. So if you're in that price range, I would like Martinez and Theodore or Parayko, quite a bit. Spurgeon, same thing can be said about him at 4,600. Another guy that blocks a ton of shots. Really haven't seen it quite this year, which is why his price is still low. But talk to me mid-season. We're going to be seeing Jared Spurgeon up in the mid 5,000s. So his price is way too low as well. So a couple of really good mid-price defensemen. Tyson Barry is a guy that I've liked through the first week of the season in DFS. His price still really low, only 4,000. That is one of the best power play units, was the best power play unit in the NHL last year. It's going to get going eventually. When you've got Leon, you've got Barry, you've got Connor, you're not going to go 0 for 10. I'd expect them to probably score a power play goal or 2 tonight because, they're not going to go 0 for 15. They're just not. Like a Connor McDavid. Come on. Love the show. Top value forward around 3,500. Thanks, Laterno. Appreciate it. And then, are there any 4th liners on PP1 worth playing? No, you don't normally find that. Very seldom will you find a 4th liner on the top power play unit. The odd time you will, but there's other guys that are on the 3rd line or whatever that might see some time, which we'll probably talk about a couple of them right now as $3,500 forwards. So 3,800 Riley Smith is really intriguing. Like I said, I really like Vegas 2 tonight, and one-offing Riley Smith at 3,800 I think is a really good play. I also like Derek Brassard a little bit in that Vegas matchup. Surprisingly enough, Derek Brassard, Tyler Pitlick, and Clayton Keller, they've been just absolutely outstanding to start the season. I don't like Brassard's shot volume, but if there's going to score some goals, it's probably going to come from them. They could see increased minutes tonight too, with Barrett Hayton out. That might limit Nick Schmaltz's minutes a little bit, but I think Clayton Keller's leading that, like those forwards in ice time right now. So Derek Brassard, a little bit of interest there as well. Other than that, Alex Tuch, 3,400. He's always a fine play. 3rd liner, doesn't see a ton of minutes, but plays a decent amount. And he's a guy that, he loves to shoot the puck as well. Could pick up a decent chunk of shots. And Jimmy Vesey, 3,300 playing, if you want to one-off somebody from Toronto too, I think that's fine. His shot volume has been pretty strong to start the year. I would like to see him play a little bit more ice time, but what are you going to do? Great show. As a new NHL DFS player, it's super helpful. No problem. Glad you guys are enjoying it. We've set a record for a number of people live today, so I really appreciate that. Hope we keep growing. I'm having a lot of fun doing this show. Anytime I can help anybody win money, that's kind of my job, so I'm enjoying it. Let me just go back again just so I can go over some of the top stacks of the night again for you guys. Somebody that I haven't talked about. Minnesota 3, I wouldn't get too carried away. They're like Montreal 1. Their underlying numbers are outstanding, but they never really do anything. Vancouver 1 still in play. I really like JT Miller at 4,900 as a one-off play. I found myself playing him quite a bit. It's only his second game back in the lineup. He picked up an assist almost immediately in his first game. So JT Miller is a guy that I found myself one-offing quite a bit when I was building lineups earlier. But I'll definitely have a little bit of Vancouver one because 16,000 to full stack Vancouver one. I don't know how long that's going to last. Eventually, it's just like Malkin yesterday. Eventually, Elias Peterson's going to get going. So 16,000 to stack them. I'm all in on that, or not all in, but I'm all for that. And yeah, I think Cahoon's a half decent one-off play too. I mean, he's still playing with Leon Draisaitl. His shot volume has been pretty solid so far. Eventually he's going to score a goal playing with Leon. So I think if you need to really dig deep for a forward one-off, like you spend up at defenseman, you don't play Hall, you don't play Whitecloud, or some of these other cheaper defensemen, then Cahoon's a good way to save money at forward. And yeah, I think that's everything. I'll give you guys 30 more seconds to ask any final questions, and we'll head out, build some lineups, and win some money. No. All right. Well, that is going to do it for the DFO DFS show for January 20th. If you guys are enjoying the show as much as you seem to be, let your friends know, unless you don't want them winning money. So hopefully they can come join us as well, and subscribe, hit the like button. I think that's what you're supposed to say on YouTube, and it helps us somehow, some way. And then make sure you click the notification bell so that you get notification when we are going live, because I'm sure you're not always going to be on Twitter at 5:15, and that's right now kind of the only way I have of letting you guys know that I'm going live, other than being subscribed. And lots of thanks coming in. Yes, let's win some cash tonight. Yeah, let's absolutely do it. We'll be back here same time tomorrow, 5:15, for a Thursday slate, which I'm assuming is absolutely massive. That's usually the case with Thursdays. So yes, a deep threat says everybody hit the like button. Absolutely. Please do. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow.